the reason behind this, and I've been talking to some guys at Model Railroader Magazine, which has gone through all this transition now, is, so I'm 75 as of a week ago. I saw all the gray hair and the stuff on the other pictures. And you get to the point. So I started modeling in 1974. So I'm over the 50-year point. And the existing layout that I have right now in some form or shape, I started building in 2002 when we moved from northern Wisconsin to Milwaukee. And so from that point until probably the year I retired, which was 2017, I was building stuff. I was expanding. I was coming up with new ideas. I was reinventing stuff. And some of you may have seen some of the pictures in Model Railroad over the years, but in any event, the positive thing about retirement was I got hooked in with a bunch of guys who like to operate, which took me to another level of the hobby. And in looking back at this, when I look at some of the operating groups that are out there, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I have a hearing aid, so what I think I hear and what you hear may be different. So in any event, the younger generation really doesn't like to build stuff as much, but they like to get involved with the groups if they're unique. And how do we take the hobby into our later years and still enjoy it? And I think we back ourselves into a corner and we think, yeah, I'm all done, I'm bored, I mean, whatever. And you probably got lots of friends you talk to. They don't do anything with their layout. They don't do any operating or whatever. In my case, operating opened up a whole new part of the hobby to me. And that brought on more ideas to be able to attack the layout and do things because I wanted to make the operation more enhanced. And you'd be surprised what you miss when you build and you walk away, maybe you putz with it or whatever. So that's the point of this whole thing is we're all sitting here, we want to stay active, we want to have fun. So what do we got to do? All right. So I hope I don't embarrass anybody by any of this stuff, but we'll give her a shot. The issues I see is a lot of us, in fact, we were talking about this, we had an op session today, is that within the hobby, within NMRA, and especially right now, there aren't a lot of builders anymore. People want to build kits. I mean, they don't want to build kits. They want to buy everything built up. Look at Woodland Scenics. The built up stuff. And their stuff is nice, but that's a whole phase of the hobby that is just taken adrift. There are other people, they quit building and they just lost their motivation to get back involved again. And then there are people that they like building, but they see all their friends getting involved in operations. So they decide they're shifting their whole thought process to operations instead of embracing the whole hobby and combining the whole things. And then you got the guys that, and there are tons of these people and you all know them, and they can't embrace the fact that they could operate their layout. They think it was never designed for operations. And so there's nothing I can do. They don't see how they could change a switch or add to this or add to that and move on from it. And so that's the point of this presentation, to say, let's look forward. So you're never done building. So everybody here, if I just hear the yays, has a layout. Is that pretty much the truth?
Yes. Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah. And if you're as bad as I am, being 75 years old, I've got structures on the layout that go back to 1974 when I first started, when nothing was made in the USA.
Yep.
And the second thing I think of, you go rail fanning and stuff, and everybody's got their cameras out and they take pictures and stuff. How do you translate those pictures that you enjoy into your existing layout? It's a miniature world we're building, and it has to reflect what's out there in Mother Nature. And so I think small changes to scenery based on our picture taking and stuff make big differences. Compare that real world to what you have in your layout. And you look at your layout and you say, I wouldn't want to live there. Well, make it livable. And then let your building signs tell a story. And I'm going to show a couple of examples in here how when I started building the railroad to get total embracement from my wife, who I consider to be the real estate director, which you all probably have the same situation. Um, we had to have photos of people around the layout, and we had to have buildings that represented what they were to us in their life. And so I would say 50% of the buildings on my layout are attached to a family member, one way or the other. So I'm going to show you how you tell a story. So I'm going to go through several examples here. This is N scale, by the way. So please allow me some tolerance for detail. But Jim Osborne, who's a member of a group up in Northern Illinois, and I've become very good friends, and which is another good point about staying involved in the hobby, meeting new friends. But I had this old Faller lumberyard building, which I bought back in the 70s when I was living in Toronto. Didn't generate any traffic. You ran a track up along the side of it, and you put some kind of a car there, and there was no purpose for the business. And that's what I said, it doesn't represent a complete industry. So the goal was to take this thing and expand it into a building that represented a full business, had a sawmill, maybe a wood box pallet operation, wanted to generate more traffic. Now you got to remember, I retired in 2017 and got involved in operations. So anything I did in the layout was intended to either enhance the operation of some way freight that would work on it, or create more thought process to the people who operated. So, and I also wanted to expand these scenes to represent something that was more complete. Do we have vehicles? Do we have people or whatever? So here's the example of how I think you should stay involved. Everybody remember this critter?
Yep.
They
Got
made
3 or 4 of them sitting around.
Do you? Well,
Yeah.
you're the first guy to start the new project. So anyway, I had this thing, and I don't think I was painted up like they did for the catalog, but in any event, this is what it evolved to. So here is the original building, and I'm going to go through a slide here that's going to show you everything we changed, but it looks pretty much like the old one. It's got some repaint, some weathering on it and stuff like that, but basically the format of the original building is right there. I had a friend of mine who used to be a dumpster diver outside of Walthers. I won't tell you his name. Anyway, he gave me some spare parts from the N scale version of that, and whatever their timber sawmill thing is. And so I took some pieces of that, and one of the problems with the MMR is by the time you're done, you put a lot of money in the pocketbooks of all the hobby shops. You have one of the better inventories of spare parts and scratch build parts than anybody else on the planet. You can probably start your own hobby shop. So you open the drawer and you look at what you have, this right sheeting and the right stuff. So here I built the sawmill part. On this end, if you understand anything about sawmills, and it goes through and gets sawed, it's got to be stacked to dry. So this is a drying shed, which was scratch built, but the trusses that are underneath here are from that same Walthers dumpster dive experience. Very easy to build though. And had a bunch of dowels, cut the woods, did a GHQ assembly here. And let's go to the next slide and where they tell you exactly what I did. The original building was there. Added the sawmill here. You got to have an office for the guy to sit back with a cigar. Sawmill conveyor, stacking for different size logs right here, inbound. And then right here, here's the loads. Any of you guys N scalers? Don't all jump.
No.
Okay. All right. All right. So an N scale, unless you live in the Pacific Northwest where they cut big trees that they send lengths that are 50 feet, 60 feet long to the sawmill. In northern Wisconsin, I mean, you think of the Escanaba Lake Superior and so on, they basically rack them into a bulkhead flat. Well, no one made them, so they gave me another little project to build this skeleton framework to go in these cars. And then this ultimately became a building that generated logs, It brought in extra wood to supplement what they sawed here to build boxes and pallets to ship out in boxcars. And actually, every now and then they got the right wood in and they cut lengths of it and dried it, and it was the perfect wood like maple or oak to send off to someone else. So all this got generated just from this one project. The other thing it did is from the operational standpoint, once again, post-retirement, trying to enhance operations. The inbound car loads are now logs and it's bulk lumber for pallet production. Outbound is cut lumber, bulkhead flats, outbound pallets and 50-foot boxes. That could put 4 cars in there for either inbound or outbound. So that job actually takes about 3 times the length of time it did beforehand to perform it. Where before it was just pick up a car and dump a car. All right. Let's see, there we go. All right, I think I missed a slide. There we go. All right, so this Prigberg's is when I was living in Rhinelander back in the 80s and 90s, my golf partner was Wally Pasberg, and we nicknamed him Wilbert Prigberg because it sounded appropriate. Anyway, he was a modeler, but he didn't have room for a layout, and he built me a kit and gave it to me, which was part of this this area that I was going to redo. So, and I don't know who the manufacturer was because I never made it. It was like a plaster cast or a resin cast structure. And I had an old beat up Helgen or something, little grain building, and they were all part of the original design back in the 1980s. No real traffic was generated after what would have been 20, 30 plus years of being moved around. The scratch built wood docks and stuff were just in bad shape. And I needed to do something with it. So I needed a total refresh. You folks know what Cream City Brick is? The Milwaukee area?
Yeah.
Mhm.
That light, okay. So this thing was painted in kind of a maroonish rust color, and it just didn't look right, and there was no detail around the windows. Did all that stuff. Wanted to add an icing platform because it was a food manufacturer in my mind. And so we wanted to add a siding for the ice delivery, and we wanted to have an ice house added to it. All right, so here's the completed scene as you see it right here. So there's your Cream City Brick. If you did any
Mhm.
modeling in the 70s, you probably saw this along with that sawmill. So this was all repainted. I had to redo the edging on the roofs. On the main building, this is that casting, and I don't do a lot with resin. It may have been resin or plaster, but added roof details to it. It was totally repainted, detail added the windows with glazing and stuff, signage. Here's the ice house that was added. And then the other thing I did was there's another slide here to show you something, but you see how these are tied together now. So this is their dry goods reception building, and this is where they do all the cold food processing and stuff. So I can use all those Chicago Northwestern refrigerator cars to be iced and take out good stuff, healthy stuff for us to eat.
Down. So what was your role in this whole thing? It sounds like you helped de-escalate the situation.
Oh, that wasn't a question. Okay. So here's the backside of it. So here's the ice delivery. The unique thing about this car right here is probably about a 1980 Concours 40-foot box car that was really horribly stenciled for Milwaukee Road bulk ice delivery. And after 40 years, I finally had a spot to put it. And the stenciling on it was so bad that it looks like it's weathered. So, there you go. So anyway, here's the ice house. This rail spur was added out about a car length. This was a new spur that was built around here. And then if we look at the front side, this loading dock, I think I had one of the supports that was left. I had to redo the whole thing, redo the tarp, repaint, all new site work and stuff like that. And you know, this, talk about site work. You look at your layout, as the buildings look like it's just floating in nowhere, you know, is anything going on there? You take a drive out, take a couple pictures and come back and say, oh, I have a lot I can do here. Okay. Roof details. I think I bought a Walther's roof detail kit box, and I've used it for least 10 different structures. And then unfortunately, I'm a civil engineer, retired. You know, you got to have asphalt against the building and you got to have some gravel. And this gravel is unique because I harvested it off the beach, Miramar Beach in Florida. So, and it really works really well. All right. So just some more detail on this, the Cream City brick I discussed. There was that loading dock, bulk ice. We'll move on to the next example. All right. The O&P meat processing pack. So my layout was built in sections, and it's all foam built within, and not pink foam. I actually used a white foam. And it's supported on a 1x4 grid in modules until I finally expanded it here or whatever. So I can expand off of it, but to tie the whole thing together, I built a rail system around it that provided about a 3.5-inch tray. The people could put their clipboards in, put their soda in, you know, whatever it was, their picks, and it locked everything together. But now, as I've watched the guys operate for about 10 years, I know how much they use the tray for certain things. So I don't have to provide the tray for anything, so I can expand into it. So this is a good example of what happened with the expansion. So I had this packing plant. It was squeezed into a triangle in the corner of a layout section. And, you know, the front of the truck hung out over the edge of the layout in that tray area. And it was pretty standard. You know, the livestock would come in in a stock pen, and you'd ship out meat on the other thing and the other siding. And I wanted to, once again, increase a little bit of variety into this location. So I wanted to add a small ice house. I think this kit was from RS Laser. And the car puller was basically, you know, this is N scale. So I didn't use dental floss, but I used thread, and I had an old motor casting from way back when that someone gave me that they bought at Ron's in Mundelein, Illinois for $1. And just things to enhance the thing, extend the length of the track for the ice house. So this is the scene before we did the expansion, okay? And if you want to understand the name here, these are the names of my grandparents, a Polish person and an Irish person. So there's the Irish 4-leaf clover, and there's the Polish crest. But in any event, the siding would come in. So these reefers come in and they're just dumped, and they never get iced or anything. So this is going to be expanded. There's 2 spots to dump off the future sausages. And so that's the scene before the expansion. So now some of you may have seen this part of this in Model Railroader. I think it was about 2 or 3 months ago, this barn and this scene right here. But the thing I want to show you is this is in N scale about 3.5 inches here, which is that tray. So where this was the outer edge of the tray of the layout, I just filled it with foam, built things up. And, you know, this packing plant, wanted to build this park. We'll talk about that in a second. But this whole scene, you can see between the glass is 3.5 inches more, which would be about 7 inches in HO in the corner of the layout. So the siding that you saw, so this is the expansion. This is all filled in here. There's that 3.5. There's the park back there on that side. You put an 8-inch section of track here. So now the people who operate have to bring the reefers in and bring them back to the ice house. Here's the cable from the car puller. Now we were able to put a greeting place here. In fact, the one thing that's missing here is a gift shop where you can come and buy the sausage. But in any event, this whole scene got expanded into something that didn't look like it was just stuck in the corner. So this is another example. So I had that 3.5 inches sitting there, and we went to our financial brokers meeting, and he had this picture on the wall of a barn that looked like this. And my wife looks at me, and she'd given me this silo kit for Christmas. This is an RS Laser kit that's in true representation of spot somewhere in Missouri, where the city had an old silo along the tracks and hired a painter. And RS Laser got the artwork release so they could make this. So we've traveled down south, you got the distilleries and stuff, and there's a lot of older properties. Scratch built the barn and made it a historic site for all the people to come and smell the cows and think what was here. And that this was supposed to be the old aging cellar, and that would have been the grain delivery. But a simple addition on the layout, I didn't have to put a 10-foot addition on the layout to do this stuff. I looked for spots around the edge to fill in. All right. Anybody watch Svengoolie? Am I getting the same response I got out when I did this before? Svengoolie is the guardian of the night on Saturday nights on Chicago.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Seen it advertised.
It's, if you want to watch the old 1940 Draculas and stuff, it's really kind of funny. And the guy knows a lot of stuff. Anyway, so you'll recognize this building like you did the other one. Sitting there on the layout, you got this big layout and it's been published or whatever else has happened to it. But you look at some of the stuff you did 30 years ago and you think, geez, I don't want to put my name behind that. But in any event, had this old Campbell Berghoff brewery. Never had a foundation on. One of the first things I've noticed is, you get kits now, put a foundation on it. You never saw clapboard siding sitting right in the dirt. It didn't have anything in here. It had a simple location, nothing to ship stuff out, no foundations. It needed a lot of work. In fact, when I show you the picture, I wanted to rebuild this and make it into something. And this is where the story making comes in, okay? So if I look at this and someone says to me, why is that building there? Well, I'm going to say, in the 1940s, Joe and Jack, they had their brewery here and they were doing this stuff, learned everything during Prohibition. And then they built this nice brewery and then everything went to big city stuff and they were stuck. But then the kids came along and said, we're going to do a microbrewery. Oh, we got the old kettle. So they take it over, but they can't make the money. So they got to decide to add on to that. So, well, if they're going to pedal with trucks, they might as well pedal more stuff. So they're going to pedal Milwaukee brews. So this is the old original. Anybody remember this kit? If
Yes.
you don't remember it, you're lying. It was one of the first wooden, back in the 70s. This underneath this water tank, there wasn't even a roof. It was just the rafters and stuff. So anyway, that's what it looked like before. And there's the finish. So basically a total repaint, acetate behind the windows. I put a deck underneath here. Kind of left this kind of ratty because it was old. But the whole concept was this becomes now a successful microbrewery. Kids are making money. They can afford to hire an excavator to dig into, take the steak knife out and cut the foam out so they have a retaining wall. And yeah, and here's the warehouse. And the other part that's interesting about this is in Rhinelander, my dad's brother inherited a Budweiser distributorship, didn't inherit, he bought it. I'd say about 1960. And that's when all the competition was starting. In those days, they still used to get the refrigerated cars out of St. Louis with the beer on a schedule of once every 2 weeks or whatever it was. But in going up there to visit with them, they had an old building where they had their office in and where they had their liquor, which didn't need refrigeration. And then they had to add on a refrigerated warehouse for the beer. So the idea is here, the kids are making money distributing beer. So this got changed from having a 1-car spot at this building to now delivery of 2 beer cars here and an ingredient in or out at this point. Took that old building and put, using styrene, put a base foundation around there. Make sure you got steps by the doors and new docks. And then this side of the building was set up to be accessible for boxcars. You couldn't clear this ledge. So you needed a dock. So we added the dock to that. And this is a very simple warehouse construction. You could probably walk out into an industrial park and use your eyeball to figure out the height of it, but basically it's loading dock for the trucks going in and out. You need a refrigerator for that. These are Walther's parts. Tank for the brewing to kind of cook. And that was fun. And never saw a ghost from Shanguli. So this is another old kit. So when I finished the MMR, which is in 2022, and even before that a little bit, I had identified 3 or 4 spots on the layout that needed to have the buildings disappear. They either had to be blowtorched or something had to happen. And I had a 40-year-old Concord Helgen kit or a grain mill that I think I had in my first layout that I built in Toronto in 1974. And then it just didn't fit. So this is, once again, another way how to tie a story in. All right. So I wanted to replace that building with a business that would be appropriate. Now, where the location of the building was, it didn't have access to the spur that was there. The spur was just hidden. And anybody who switched this spot, and you'll see this in a second, would either knock the building over or they would derail the cars trying to get at it. Most of the guys come here are HO guys and they hate N scale, but they still come. That's because I feed them cookies. And if you have operations, you know what I'm saying. So anyway, here's what happened. So this was the old beater. Anybody seen that one before?
Yep.
Mhm.
All right. That's interesting. No one's lying here. Okay. This interesting. There was an N scale magazine that came out back in the 80s. And the guy Huntsman, who was writing all the articles, was building some scale town. And this was my first scratch build attempt at doing anything. I built it out of styrene. I wish I would have done it out of wood, but it survived several moves anyway. But you can see what I'm saying. So there's a cattle pen here, and there's just a switch yard over this way, and they come up and they have to grab a couple of these cars to go off and get slaughtered for sausages over at Ostermeyer's. And they can't see where they're coupling on, so there's a lot of 5-finger action here at this point. The building is the pits. I mean, it's been beat up and whatever. And so I had to do something. And my oldest son lives down in East Troy, Wisconsin, southern Wisconsin. Has become a connoisseur with smoking meats and stuff like that. And I thought, okay, all right, do one for the kid. Remember, I got to have names of family on this stuff. So his name is Drew. He's got to be a cattle broker. So there was no identification between the other building and that stock pen. Now all of a sudden there's identity, because what Drew does is he receives the stock, he brokers it, and he picks the best cows to take into his smokehouse for his sausage. And he sends the junk over to the hot dog plant. So there's the story. So we never throw anything out. I do a lot of conversions on Classic Metalworks buildings. This is one of their conversions right here. I think this is a GC laser body change. So I got a leftover. So that now becomes, if you show up to buy some sausage or venison or whatever, he comes out, he pitter patters up the steps, he opens the old beat up cooler, he gets your stuff, and you go home. So I'm talking about it, building a story behind it. And so you've got your layout, it's been there for years. Sit and look at it and think, how can I make this interesting? Okay. All right. So every time the guys come over here, they see the amount of space I have in my basement, and they say, well, you should expand. And I said, you should maintain. And you heard that before. And remember, there's a real estate director. But in any event, the nice thing about the way I built the layout with the white foam and the lightweight 1x4 framing is that it's very easy to expand on the fringe. And you may, with your layouts, have that ability. Unfortunately, with the heavier scales, you got to use a little more support. But so in any event, I've got 2 or 3 pockets on the layout where I can expand by bumping out the outer edge, like I showed you before at the O&P packing plant. So I have one of the towns, it's Pelican Rapids, and there's one of our 3 large yards is nearby, and what would typically happen is there was one industry, and we got served, a switch crew would depart from this one yard, go up there, all the switching was in, just back them in, back them out. And didn't require any thought process. And and actually the 2 characters that operate at this spot all the time needed a challenge. Okay. One of them was Jim Kelly, who was a retired former editor at Model Railroader.
Yep. Model
Yeah.
Road.
You know, Jim. Okay. The other guy, Gordy.
And Scale.
Gordy. So these
Tallahatchie Loop.
Yeah, so these 2 guys sit there on their stools and they just kind of grin and watch everybody as they do their work. So, you know, and part of this whole hobby is you got to create a game. So I wanted to get their job to be a little more challenging. So I wanted to bump out the layouts, get away from just back end switching, and that's what this whole thing turned into. And I wanted to build 4 kits too. Yeah. So originally this was the only building. This is an old scratch built roofing plant that I had built. And so they basically would back in cars of either asphalt or felt or whatever, or ship out. And they'd bring in, you know, materials and then on the backside here, there were roofing granules that would come in. You see here's the roofing granules coming in. So this was all added as new right here. And as ugly as the Walthers Cargill elevator is, it all of a sudden increased the car movements quite a bit. Still all back in, but now there were 3 or 4 car movements here, and they had multiple car movements here. So now we're generating a few extra car loads going up there. I wanted to get it to the point where qualified as a full turn. Go up with a caboose, do your thing, and that's it. Oh, I'm putting people to sleep here. So the other part we wanted to do is we wanted to have some facing switches. And so just opposite where you saw that before, added 3 industries back here. There's a warehouse, there's a fertilizer plant, there's a woodenware plant. This is where you can get your roasted chicken, and this is where you can take your dog if you're going out of town. So wanted to get that and put in place. And that created that movement right now takes them about 40 minutes, 45 minutes to go up with all the switching and all the movements that happen. So that's pretty much it on the bump outs. I have one thing under construction right now, which I'll tell you about, and you'll probably think I'm all insane, but I found a nice kit from Bar Mills. We're a pallet factory and did not want another pallet factory on the plant. So I looked at this thing and it had a big old brick chimney on it. And I said, well, what am I going to do with that? Well, this has evolved into being another story. This is the story of the 2nd generation taking over an old business. And this is based pretty much, in fact, on something that happened to me up in Rhinelander. We had a company that had a manufacturing concrete blocks, and they couldn't produce and compete anymore. So they sold the block part, but they had this solid fireproof building that they had. And it was right at the time when cremations were coming on. And they added a crematorium to their building because it was fireproof. And they got them into memorials and all the other stuff. So this pallet factory job is it has a little demonstration area where you can go out and you can look at the different memorial headstones you want. The theory in my head is they used to build wooden caskets, but now they're doing real caskets. And they got the crematorium. And to find the name of the place, I went on and researched, and their name's a funeral home. So me and my 75-year-old, I'm going to start a funeral home. So I got to get a name for it. So there's actually a website that has the top 450 names to call a funeral or a crematory parlor. And I found the one that just fit the railroad perfect. It was called Last Laugh. We'll share that with you at some future date. I figured a way I can get paid for the picture. So anyway, as you saw, we were trying to improve operations. And so what have we done so far? Osborne Lumber, we lengthened the spur to allow 4 cars inbound and outbound. Prigberg's, we added an extra spur and 2 or 3 other things that could create more activity for laps. O&P Meats, just a simple thing. But the intent of adding that ice house was to have guys read their instructions when they operate. And it says when you deliver the cars, they should go to the ice house. And when you pick them up, they'll be at the dock. I still have not found them at the ice house. So nothing's changed in life. So, and then Pelican Rapids, we added some additional stuff. Sorry, I'm frank sometimes. So, in the course of operating, and I think I did something in Model Railroader back here about 5 or 6 years ago, but we build our layouts and then our friends come in and we operate. And regardless of what we use, JMRI or whatever, people go out and operate and you got problems. You either have a choke point or you have something that just doesn't, it kills the session. And we had that situation on my layout. I mean, I built it originally to fit into a basement, then I moved to another basement and was able to salvage it, expanded it. And then when I started operating it all made sense to me until people tried to do it. So the problem I had was I had a very large yard, which was the one where we build all our way freights. This yard, they generate about 5 or 6 way freights. So you got a switcher running around back and forth in here. And the main lines, if you can see here on the left, is coming in here and here. And I thought, this is great. I got it, what's called the south bypass. It comes in here and goes there. And if he wants to go here, he can go on this ladder and he can go here. And then if he doesn't, he can even go on this ladder and come over here. That's a lot of options, right? Well, guess what? These trains that they typically build are about 20 to 25 cars in length. Now I got more dark eyes glaring at me about, how can I get these people to sit there? And then the other problem is it's modeled after Soo Line, which is single track dark territory from what this is modeled. So this light lead coming in here, there's no bypass opportunity. The same thing going out on the other side. The obvious thing was to have them come through this diamond into the tunnel. The rabbit goes in the hole around the curve. If you kind of follow the green here. And guess what? They can get right up here. So that solved one problem with this main, but it didn't get them onto the other main. So the solution was, let's see if I could, was to connect. So this was that main that was coming in to create the 4th leg out of that junction and bypass it. That took 50% of the trains out. And this was after the first year. Now that once again, to talk about building with foam, I was able to do this whole cut. I just took the old foam saw out and cut the terrain. It's all Woodland Scenic supported grades and stuff. So it was pretty easy to lay this thing in about a day. I felt happy. And everybody came in the next session and they were held. There was much rejoicing. All right. And if you know what movie that's from, tell me. So then I had another congestion point too. Rheinberg, not to be confused with Rhinelander, where I grew up, was a major area where trains would move through the system. And the main line was single track and everything came together in one point. So by the way, these are CAD rail drawings, which I've used pretty much all the way through. So where you see the red, this is what was added, but this main line would come down here and intersect this main line coming here, which would pick up the main line coming from here. And this was, I mean, these guys are trying to back up 22 car taconite trains. You know that the cheering was going on to see who'd flip the train. And so we had to do something. So the idea was, here's Rheinberg up here, is that any traffic coming from Rheinberg back around this way to the rest of the layout could take a diversion this way. And in a lot of cases, the whole train would fit in here, this siding. And that wouldn't interfere with anything that was coming on this main track and coming around and going this way. And that has been a big improvement. And we just did that about a year ago, and it's really worked out well. Once again, you take a step back, you look at your layout, and if you operate, what are the headaches? And get your blood flowing and get the tools out. And you may have to buy new glue. You know, it might be hot, might be solid now, but it's been there. But anyway, once again, a simple project, a big improvement on operations. All right, the other thing, I don't know how we're doing for time here. Let's see. I think we're doing okay. We okay?
Doesn't make
Yep.
any difference.
Does everybody get off the phone? Everybody's gotten off already. Oh, it's too bad. All right. The filling in the holes on the layout. Okay, so maybe you're past that point where your kids were all excited to come over and look at grandpa's train or whatever it was. But from your own personal standpoint, you've got friends that come over, you operate, or they want, and you want to make the more human element to what you've got there. And you know, not only people sell these little animals and other stuff, but you got to put them to work, and you got to have a sense of humor behind it, because that's what really makes it fun to talk to people. So the story behind this right here is for one of my Christmases, and I guess my kids got sick of giving me train stuff for Christmas because they never give it to me anymore. But you may recognize, I think it was who was the one that had all the really imported cheap plastic components? Model something. It's not coming in here.
Model
But-
Power?
Yeah, that was the one. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So it had this little cluster of, looks like a hunting shack and an outhouse, and who knows what that was, and a bridge and stuff. And the kids give it to me at Christmas, and you're like, hey, yeah, that was great. And then your wife looks at you the next day and says, what are you going to do with that? I said, I don't know.
Mm.
And so I just put it aside and just stared at it for a while. And I thought, you know, and this is supposed to be northern Wisconsin, Minnesota kind of stuff. We got lumber shacks and whatever. So these are just cut into the terrain to make a little logging camp. And on a typical layout that you go to, either you're looking at backdrop buildings that are crammed right against the sidings and there's no depth to it. But in a lot of cases, you find places where there are open spots. And this is where you put the life back into it. And so this is one of those spots. I've got backdrop on about 15 feet of the layout. And I just needed something to enhance it. So there you go. That's the logging camp. And of course, if you live up north in Wisconsin, you've got to have a place up there to go so you can have a good time on the weekend, you know? So this is where Ma and Pa Hubbard go on. So this is a Woodland Scenics little scene. These are actually fire pits, and they've got little flickering flames in them and stuff like that. But it's one of those bare areas on layout. So what's a typical guy going to do? He gets his scenery stuff out and he just plasters the whole hillside full of whatever foliage he wants, and it looks like a forest. Okay, but that's not the way we live, you know. So here they're having a good time. And these are the people that are smarter. They know what it's like to get and living up there at one point, I can tell you, it's better. But I mean, this would be a typical scene in the 50s or 60s up northern Wisconsin. You know, a log cabin framed in. They got a wood pile for the fireplace and stuff. They probably got a Woody or some small little Jeep or something like that. They still got rabbit ears on the cabin and stuff. And guess what? It's a lit kit from Woodland Scenics, and I didn't have to build it. But it fit into a hillside perfect, where there was nothing for anybody to look at. And when I talked about just fill the hillside with the foliage, I mean, this would be the typical thing that someone would do. So I say, look back, take that hillside and say, oh, what could I do there? Okay, well, let's see what else we could do. Oh, we can serenade our girlfriend on the shoreline. So I've been a big believer in years for adding little details around it. And I mean, I think this is Ken, this is a Thompson boat.
No kidding.
I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Anyway, guy in a boat, dog in the front, and a good-looking lady on the shoreline. So is it true romance? Who knows? And then there are the people who couldn't buy the cabin, but didn't want to pull the trailer. They like to just move in. And this was very typical up north,
Oh, yeah.
what you can see is this is along a riverbed. Gramps is going on the shoreline to see if someone's caught a fish, and the girls are deserting the family because she's getting too old. She's gonna go hide. But, putting the scene together like that.
Yeah.
I was a Boy Scout leader for years, so we had to have a Boy Scout scene. Once again, you can see it's on the edge of the layout here. So we got a couple of hikers with backpacks up here. We got a fire pit going here, and all the smoke is blown in the Scoutmaster's tent. And let's see what else is going to, someone's sneaking off here. Could be, but real cheap. I can't even remember how I got if these were Woodland Scenics, hikers or camper things and stuff, but it's been fun. My son worked as a land surveyor, still does, and I'm a civil engineer, so this was an easy one with Woodland Scenics. This scene right here with the orchard and stuff is reflective of our family going with our grandkids to a farm called the Elegant Farmer up here in the fall, had apples.
Yeah.
And we'd go pick apples with them and stuff. So, but here's the truck, the survey truck. There's actually a sign off the sign that says, survey crew. Here they all are lined up. And of course, the engineer knows how to, which person to put in place here and stuff. But, this little scene, and when we design layouts and we work with layouts, we're always looking at the track and operations. And I'm not saying that universally. There's a lot of people put a lot of detail in, and I've seen a lot of really great layouts. But if we're talking to trying to rekindle a hobby in someone's blood, they just took a look at some things that they could do. And I think a drive in the country is a great way to start and to get some pictures. But this just brings life to the layout rather than just choo-choos. And of course, the best time of the day is after 5 o'clock. Gramps has got the grill going right here.
Yeah.
They got their choo-choos coming through with the local. The ladies are happy. All is good, right? And that's all I have to tell you. So
All right.
hope you enjoyed it.
Very nice.
Very nice.
And I hope it gave you some good ideas. Have you got any questions on anything you want?
I want to congratulate you on your scenery. If you hadn't told me it was N scale, I would have thought it was HO.
It has been fun, almost all the so scenery is a combination of natural materials and some woodland scenic stuff and some other stuff. But when you've been doing this stuff for 50 years, you hate to admit when you learned about doing something at what time, but it's fun, when I lived in northern Wisconsin, getting out in the weather in the fall was a blessing. Once the berries were picked and you were able to, that's the thing about living up north. So, the goldenrod picking, all the other stuff, it just made sense to make trees. And either the goldenrod's gotten better or I've gotten better with the scissors, but the trees have improved over time. So, yeah.
Steve, one thing I enjoyed in your presentation, you stressed the stories behind things. And I think that's quite important on any railroad that many people just never think about or never do. But the stories, especially when you have visitors or you're showing it, it's fantastic. And it's a great way to improve the railroad.
Well, and that's what makes it fun because you all got friends or operators and stuff. I mean, so today we had an op session and the people had the first viewing of Last Laugh. The crematory, whatever it's supposed to be. And, you sit, I enjoy building craftsman kits. I really enjoy it. It's just peaceful. And I think I I perused, I don't know how many websites over the last 2 months looking for the right things, and you can't find this stuff. So when you really think, when I lived in Rhinelander and you looked at the second and third generation businesses that were in the family building, they didn't reflect on what the building was originally built for. So we sit there and we look at different buildings on websites and or in hobby shops, and what do we want to buy? And it's just to get the building to fit and figure out what you can put in for fun. You know,
Mm.
if you can't have fun doing this stuff, man, cash in the money before it's worth nothing. But I mean, that's the whole point of it. And I'm assuming Mike Hervela was at our op session again. I think a lot of you folks know him. And I said, what are these guys like? Well, they're pretty sharp, you know, they know their stuff, they've been around. And I said, oh, okay. So I was a little skittish on this, but if that in fact is true, you've been through this thought process. I mean, when you were building this stuff, when you were laying it out, you're thinking, oh, Ken Thompson, I know you just rethemed your layout. I haven't seen it, but you had a vision of something you wanted to do. And so people come down, why did you do this? You got a story right
Yeah.
there. And you can talk about, because you're involved in the railroad for years, you can tell them about individual things that happen. So
Yeah.
that's the whole point of the hobby, you know. I got time. But yes, Brian. Brian, did you?
No, I
Yep.
was just rubbing on something on my face.
Oh, I thought you were doing a new, what is it? Something 6 cream for your face or whatever. They advertise.
No, just had an itch.
All right.
Well, Steve, thank you very much. Is there another question?
Nope.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, we appreciate you coming on, Steve, and I've got you on the email now. So if you ever want to come to these calls on Thursdays, you're absolutely welcome. But we really appreciate you presenting today. It was
Yeah,
really
I-
great.
nice.
It was nice to be able to do something that you create more than once.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
All right, there you go.
Right.
Thanks, Steve, too.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That's great. All
I'll
right.
sign in.
Well, guys, we don't have anybody scheduled for next week, I don't think, but I don't have my thing up. Maybe we do. I can't remember. No, we've got Ken set up for 2 weeks from tonight, but we have next week open. So if anybody wants to present, just let me know. And with that, enjoy your Thursday evening. Thanks for coming.
Good night, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank
So
you.
long.
All right.
Thanks again, Steve.